Welcome to the deep dive. You know that feeling when you're trying to juggle a million things at once? Well, today we're diving into Gary Keller's The One Thing to figure out how to cut through that chaos and get extraordinary results.
Yeah, and Keller doesn't just tell us to focus, he backs it up with tons of examples. Like, you see this one thing pattern in successful companies all the time.
Oh, totally. Which ones really stood out to you?
Well, think about KFC. It all started with Colonel Sanders and that one secret chicken recipe.
Right. And what about the Adolf Coors Company?
They had incredible growth for decades, all fueled by basically one product.
It's amazing how a single focus can have such a huge impact.
And of course, you can't forget Starbucks. They built an empire on, well, coffee.
Okay, but it's not just about having one product, right?
Mm.
It's about finding that core driver of success, whatever that might be.
You got it. Think Google. Their one thing is search, right?
Which then led to everything else, like their massive advertising business.
Exactly. Find that core competency and you can build an empire around it. It's not just companies, though. Keller shows how this applies to individuals, too.
Yeah, like Oprah Winfrey.
Mm.
Her success was hugely impacted by Jeffrey G. Jacobs, right?
Right. He helped her channel her energy, not just by being talented, but by creating her own production company, Harpo Productions.
So it wasn't just about being good at what she did. It was about strategically focusing her efforts.
Exactly. It totally changed the trajectory of her career.
That's so interesting. And then there's Bill and Melinda Gates. They've really applied that one thing mindset to philanthropy.
Totally. They didn't spread their resources thin. Instead, they created one foundation to laser focus on tackling tough problems.
So instead of trying to do everything, they went all in on a few key areas.
But even more focused than that, most of their grants go to their global health program, which is aimed at eradicating infectious diseases.
Wow. So they narrowed it down even further.
Within that program, their one thing is vaccines.
It's like those Russian nesting dolls. Each layer gets more and more specific. And it's amazing how that focused approach has led to such a global impact. Okay, so we know focusing is good, but
There are those pesky myths that trip us up, right?
totally. Keller calls them lies, and honestly, we all fall for them. They sound so logical on the surface, but they hold us back.
Like the idea that everything matters equally.
Ugh, that's a big one for me. I'm totally guilty of that.
But it's just not true. The 80-20 principle suggests that 80% of your results come from just 20% of your efforts.
So it's not about doing everything, it's about doing the right things.
Exactly.
And that ties into another myth, multitasking. We think we're supposed to juggle everything at once. But,
The research actually says it makes us less efficient.
yeah, no kidding. It's like trying to drive with your eyes closed.
Keller actually compares it to being drunk.
Wait, really? Multitasking is like being drunk.
Yep, studies show it has similar effects on our cognitive abilities.
Okay, that's going to make me think twice before checking email during meetings. So everything matters equally, multitasking out the window. What about the myth of the disciplined life? I have to admit, I'm not exactly disciplined all the time.
Well, the good news is you don't have to be. Success isn't about being perfectly disciplined 24/7. It's more about building the right habits. Like brushing your teeth, you don't need tons of willpower every time because it's automatic.
Okay, so it's about making the important things a habit. I like that. Which brings us to another myth, willpower. We tend to think it's always available, right?
Right, like it's an endless resource. But willpower is like a muscle, it gets tired.
Yeah.
So it's about managing it, not assuming you have an endless supply.
Interesting. Okay, what other myths are we busting today?
Oh, the myth of the balanced life. Sounds great in theory, right?
Ugh.
Work, family, hobbies, everything perfectly balanced.
Yeah, the dream.
But that constant striving for balance can actually prevent us from reaching our full potential.
So you're saying that to really excel at something, you might have to go all in, even if it means things are temporarily out of balance.
You got it. It's about strategic trade-offs. You can counterbalance, but trying to keep every area of your life perfectly balanced might keep you from excelling in any of them.
That's a really good point. And finally, the myth that big is bad. Like, we shouldn't get ahead of ourselves.
But Keller says thinking big is essential for extraordinary results. Look at Sabir Bhatia. He came to America with almost nothing, but he had this huge dream and ended up creating Hotmail, then sold it to Microsoft for a fortune.
Wow. Okay, so we've debunked these myths, but how do we actually find our one thing?
That's where the focusing question comes in. It's a question that can unlock so much potential.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What is this magical focusing question?
It's pretty simple. What's the one thing I can do in a specific area of my life such that by doing it, everything else will be easier or unnecessary?
It's like finding that one domino that knocks down all the others. It's not just a to-do list. It's identifying that one thing that makes everything else fall into place.
And you can apply it to any area of your life. Imagine you want to double your sales in the next 6 months. The focusing question becomes, what's the one thing I can do to double sales such that by doing it, everything else will be easier or unnecessary?
I love how specific that is. Okay, so that's for work.
Yeah.
What about something like improving your marriage?
The question would be, what's the one thing I can do this week to improve my marriage such that by doing it, everything else will be easier or unnecessary?
It forces you to get really clear on that one key action. I love it.
It's about moving from vague desires to that one concrete thing you can do. And once you've found it, the next step is protecting it.
Protecting it. How do we do that?
Time blocking. It's basically making an appointment with yourself for your one thing and treating it with the same commitment as a meeting with, say, your boss. You wouldn't just blow that off, right?
Definitely not. Okay, so time blocking. Tell me more.
Keller himself struggled with time management, but he realized that to really focus on his one thing, he needed dedicated time, uninterrupted time. That's time blocking. It's about making that time sacred.
And how does it actually work?
Well, he uses Stephen King as an example. He blocks out 4 hours every single morning for writing.
Wow, 4 hours every day. Every day. And he credits that consistent habit to the fact that he's written like dozens of novels and short stories. It shows you what dedicated time can do.
Yeah.
But it's not just the quantity of time, it's the quality.
Oh, right, like focused time versus distracted time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Keller talks about maker time versus manager time. Maker time is for that deep, focused work, like your Stephen King writing time. Manager time is for meetings, emails, those kinds of things.
So it's about prioritizing that maker time for your one thing and really protecting it.
Exactly. And he tells this story about an executive assistant who was skeptical about time blocking, but she saw huge productivity gains within a week just by blocking out her time. That's pretty amazing. It's not just blocking time, it's using that time well.
Yeah.
Didn't Keller talk about Jerry Seinfeld's don't break the chain method too?
Oh, yeah, that's a great one. Seinfeld uses this method to build daily momentum for his one thing, which is writing jokes. He uses a big calendar and marks each day he writes with a big red X. The goal is to build this long, unbroken chain of X's.
It's like a visual reminder.
Exactly. It's all about building that consistent momentum. But even with the focusing question, time blocking, there's more to it. Keller outlines 3 key commitments that are essential for making the most of your one thing.
Okay, I'm ready to commit. What are those 3 commitments?
The first one is to follow the path of mastery. It's about continuously working to improve your skills and knowledge in your chosen area.
So it's not enough to just identify your one thing. You have to actually get good at it.
Exactly. It's a journey, not a destination. You have
Right.
to put in the time and effort.
Makes sense. And this commitment to mastery ties into Keller's second commitment, right?
Yeah, it's about moving from an E to a P approach.
E to P. Okay, I'm lost.
Think of E as entrepreneurial. It's about working with your current skills and resources. But a P approach, or purposeful approach, pushes you beyond your comfort zone.
I see. So it's about constantly seeking out ways to improve.
You got it. It's exciting and maybe a little scary, but it means you're not limited by what you currently know. You can grow and evolve.
I like that a lot.
Yeah.
Okay, so mastery, E to P. What's the third commitment?
Living the accountability cycle.
Accountability. That word can make people a little nervous.
I know, but it's so important. If you're not accountable, it's easy to slip back into old habits. Keller says find an accountability partner, someone to help you stay on track. Research shows that having someone in your corner can dramatically increase your chances of reaching your goals.
That's like having a teammate. Okay, we've got the focusing question, time blocking, the 3 commitments, but I'm guessing there's still some obstacles that get in our way, right?
Oh, absolutely. Keller calls them the 4 thieves of productivity, and they're sneaky.
Okay, I'm ready to unmask these thieves. Who's first?
The inability to say no.
Oh, that one is so tough. It's hard to say no, especially when you want to be helpful, but it can lead to being totally overwhelmed.
Learning to say no gracefully is key. Keller suggests asking a question instead of just saying a flat-out no. Like, instead of saying, no, I can't help you with that, try something like, have you considered asking someone else?
It's a good tip.
Yeah.
So, inability to say no is the first thief. What's next?
Fear of chaos.
Ooh, I think I might struggle with that one. I like things neat and orderly. Chaos stresses me out.
It's natural to want things to be predictable, but when you're truly focused on your one thing, other things might slide a little. It's about accepting that a little messiness is okay.
That's a good reminder. Okay, who's thief number 3?
Poor health habits.
Oh, yeah. It's easy to neglect your health when you're busy,
Yeah.
but it always catches up to you.
You can't pour from an empty cup. If you're tired and run down, your productivity plummets.
So sleep, healthy food, exercise, these are all part of the equation. Okay, and the final thief.
An environment that doesn't support your goals. If you're surrounded by distractions and negativity, it's tough to stay focused.
Make sense? Our environment can either help us or hurt us.
Exactly. It's about creating a workspace, whether it's physical or mental, that supports you. Maybe that means decluttering your desk, setting boundaries with family, or finding a new coffee shop to work in. It's about taking control.
Wow, we've covered so much ground today. We talked about the power of the one thing, the myths that hold us back, the focusing question, time blocking, those 3 commitments, and the 4 thieves of productivity.
And there's so much more to explore.
I know, I can't wait.
Well, then stay tuned. We'll be back to continue our deep dive in part 2.
See you then.
Welcome back. So last time we left off talking about finding your one thing.
Right. But how do we actually put this into practice, like in our everyday lives?
Well, Keller breaks it down into different areas like personal life, work life, even spiritual life, and community involvement.
Okay, so it's not just about work.
No, it's about taking that focus and applying it to all the things that really matter to you.
Got it. So let's start with personal life.
Right.
How can we use this focusing question to, like, strengthen relationships or create better experiences?
Okay, let's say you want to improve your marriage. Instead of just vaguely saying, we need to work on things, you use the focusing question.
Give me an example.
You could ask, what's the one thing we can do this week to improve our marriage so that everything else becomes easier or unnecessary?
I see. So it's about getting really specific and actionable.
Exactly.
Okay, that makes sense.
Well,
And this
but-
works for family time too, right?
Absolutely. You could ask, what's the one thing we can do every week to have more quality family time?
Or what's the one thing we can do to make our next vacation amazing?
Yes. It's all about being intentional with those special moments.
You know, we could even apply this to supporting our kids with schoolwork.
How so?
Like, what's the one thing we can do tonight to support our kids' schoolwork that will make the biggest difference?
I love it. You're getting it. It's not about doing all the things. It's about finding that one thing that's most impactful.
It's a total shift in thinking. Okay, so we've talked about personal life. What about work life? How can the focusing question help us be more productive at work?
Well, imagine you're going for a promotion. Instead of just working hard and hoping for the best, ask yourself, what's the one thing I can do to get that promotion so that everything else becomes easier or unnecessary?
I like that. It helps you focus your energy on the things that really matter.
Exactly. And it works for teams too.
So if you're leading a team, you could ask, what's the one thing our team can do to achieve this quarter's goals?
You got it. But it doesn't have to be these big, ambitious goals.
Right. You could also use it for those everyday tasks like managing your time better.
Exactly. You could ask, what's the one thing I can do to streamline my workflow so that everything else is easier?
So it's about finding those little things that free up time and energy. This is really cool.
And you know what's really interesting? Keller applies this to other areas of life too, like even our spiritual lives and community involvement.
Okay, now that's where I get a little skeptical. How can you apply a productivity principle to something like spirituality?
It's not about making spirituality a task on your to-do list. It's more about taking that same intentionality and applying it to those areas.
Okay, I'm listening. Give me an example.
Let's say you're active in your church. You could ask, what's the one thing we can do to create a more powerful worship experience?
Oh, I see what you mean. Or what's the one thing we can do to make our mission outreach more successful?
Exactly. It's about aligning your actions with your spiritual values.
And you could do the same for community involvement, right?
Absolutely. Ask yourself, what's the one thing we can do to improve our sense of community?
Or what's the one thing we can do to help the homeless in our community?
Exactly. It's taking that same focused intentionality and applying it to create positive change.
I love that. Okay, so we've seen how to apply the focusing question in all these different areas. But how do we actually find the time to do these things?
Time blocking, remember?
Right? Time blocking. We can't just think about our one thing. We got to actually do it.
Exactly. And Keller suggests we block out time for two things. First, Block out time to actually figure out the answer to the focusing question.
So like a meeting with yourself to brainstorm and research a goal.
Yes. And then you block out time to actually implement your answer.
So scheduling work sessions, blocking out time for exercise, even scheduling those date nights.
Exactly. It's about moving it from someday to actually doing it.
And then the key is to stick to it. Don't let other things crowd out that time.
You got it. It's a commitment. I was fascinated by the part where Keller talks about the history of the word priority.
Oh, yeah, that was just...
The word priority used to be singular, meaning the very first thing. It wasn't until the 20th century that we started using the plural priorities.
So we went from having one clear priority to suddenly having a bunch of them. No wonder we feel scattered.
Right. We've lost sight of that power of singularity.
And Keller's book is all about getting back to that, finding that one thing that's most important.
Exactly. And he gives us specific strategies for being more productive. One of the most interesting is what he calls connecting today to all your tomorrows.
Connecting today to all your tomorrows. Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
It's about the power of visualization, but not just visualizing the outcome. It's about visualizing the process.
Oh, like instead of just imagining yourself crossing the finish line of a marathon.
You visualize all the training runs, the early mornings, the sweat and discipline it took to get there.
I get it. It's about connecting the dots between your present actions and your future goals. It's not just about the destination, it's about the journey.
Exactly. It's powerful stuff. And then Keller has this interesting idea about how to judge the success of a time management system.
Okay, how do we do that?
He says it's all about the productivity it produces. He's made an interesting observation over the years. He's never worked for someone who wasn't already a millionaire or who didn't become one.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. What's the secret?
Well, he noticed that all these successful people were incredibly productive. They had systems in place to maximize their time and energy.
So it's not just working hard, it's working smart. It's having the right system.
And that system is time blocking. It's about taking control of your time, aligning your actions with your goals, and creating a structure for success.
That makes sense. Do you have an example of how this works in the real world?
Sure. Keller talks about Paul Graham, the founder of Y Combinator. He realized that maker time was crucial for his team.
Y Combinator, the startup accelerator.
Yep, that one. He knew that interrupting people's flow during those peak creative times could really hurt their productivity, so he created a company culture that prioritized focus.
That must be rare in the startup world where it's all go, go, go all the time.
Right. He actually clustered all the meetings at the end of the day. This gave everyone big blocks of uninterrupted time for that important creative work.
It's a great example of how leaders can create an environment that supports both productivity and innovation.
Absolutely. This whole conversation is making me think about how I can use these strategies in my own life. It's so easy to get caught up in the day-to-day and lose sight of what really matters.
I'm with you on that. It feels like Keller is giving us permission to simplify, to focus our energy on what's truly important.
Exactly. And to create a life that's both productive and meaningful.
He's giving us a roadmap.
And it all starts with asking that one simple question. What's your one thing?
One of the biggest takeaways for me is this idea that success is an inside job. It's not about what's happening around us.
It's about our mindset, our choices.
Yeah. Keller says that to live a life without regrets, we need to start with purpose, priority, and productivity.
It's knowing what matters most and then actually doing something about it.
And I love how he brings it all together with that story about the boy and the puzzle.
Oh, yeah. The one where he figures out that if he puts the man together first, everything else falls into place.
Exactly. It's like our one thing is our man. If we build our lives around that core purpose, everything else kind of naturally aligns.
It's not about chasing some random definition of success. It's about creating a life that feels meaningful, a life that reflects your values.
Okay, so as we wrap up our deep dive into the one thing, let's give our listeners some concrete steps they can take away. What can they start doing today?
Well, the first thing is to ask yourself that focusing question, but in each area of your life, what's the one thing you can do to get those extraordinary results?
Think big, be specific, right?
Exactly. Find those leverage points that'll make the biggest difference. And once you have your one thing...
Schedule time for it. Actually
Right.
put it on your calendar.
Yes. Make it an appointment. And then protect that time like crazy.
And don't forget those 3 commitments we talked about. Mastery, moving from E to P, and that accountability cycle.
Those are key. Always be working to improve those skills, push yourself beyond your comfort zone, and find someone to help you stay accountable.
And we can't forget about those four Ps of productivity. Saying yes too much, being scared of a little chaos, forgetting to take care of ourselves, and having an environment that just doesn't support us.
Right. Those are sneaky, so we got to be proactive. Create an environment that's actually conducive to focus and productivity.
It's all about being intentional, isn't it?
It really is. With our time, our energy, our environment, it all starts with awareness.
So, to sum it all up,
Mm.
if you want to live a life that's truly meaningful and fulfilling, if you want to get those amazing results,
Start by identifying your one thing.
and then build your life around it.
It's a simple idea, but it can really change the way you live and work.
Absolutely. Well, that's it for our deep dive into the one thing. We hope you've enjoyed this conversation.
We had a blast.
And we hope you've gotten some great ideas for how to achieve extraordinary results in your own life.
Remember, it all starts with one question. What's your one thing?
Keep that question in mind. And until next time, happy focusing.